Hello and welcome to another episode of DIY EV Chat, the show, podcast, video, all of those things about making your own electric car. My name's Tom Cheesewright, and tonight my guest, it's tonight for me anyway, it might be when you're listening to this or watching this, but anyway, for this episode my guest is Chris Hazell from Zero EV, a man who'll be very familiar to, well, just about anyone who's started looking at or has built their own electric car. Welcome, Chris.
Welcome. Hello. Nice to be here.
Thanks for coming on. I really appreciate it. Now, listen, you and I were just joking about the fact that you're a pro now and you've got this business. I'm guessing you are the biggest supplier of EV components and kits in the UK. I don't know if that's official, but it certainly feels that way.
Maybe not just the UK anymore.
Ooh! Well, before we get all Billy Big Bananas, you started as a DIYer. Let's go back to the beginning. How did you get into building electric cars?
So I owe it all, or a lot of it, to Kevin Sharp.
Right, okay.
Which is with Damien Maguire and Johannes. It's sort of that group of three, I suppose, is where it all started some 4 years ago, I think, roughly. And then it got out of hand quite quickly, shall we say. But it very much started DIY for me. I had custom shops. I used to do sort of one-off builds. So it was running for about a year before I got into EV stuff. I was sort of in a point where I exited one company, started up again in a little small shop, just me, just doing the jobs I wanted to do on my own in my little sort of 1,000 square foot unit. So I was playing around with like Porsches and Audi R8s and sort of just fun cars that I could spend a month or so on a car and not have to worry about. Like previous place before that was like a service garage where I used to do ramp rental and stuff. So it was always like 7 days a week, full on, just getting by, and then changed to sort of the position where actually I can just do the jobs I want to do with very low overheads. So that was where I sort of got to, and then I got offered a scrap Tesla motor from a breakage yard locally for quite cheap, and I thought, well, I'll just take a risk. Why not? And then I started the thing that everyone still does these days is how do you build an electric car? How do you get this thing to work? And how do you get it to work on a budget? That was sort of where it all started. And then I started looking on the forums. I reached out to Damien, in which he then put me in contact with Kevin because they were doing a trip to the UK and I wanted to pop in and see me when they came over. So I had Kevin arrive along with Anne from New Electric and Damien for a day and just went through loads of stuff. And then I got lumbered, whether it's lumbered, I don't know. Kevin's split screen camper van appeared quite quickly, shall we say. The never ending camper van of Kevin's that is still, I don't know if it's on the road yet or not. So I did loads of the work on that. So I mounted the small drive unit in the back of it, did all the battery pack stuff for that, the rear pack, the undercarriage pack on that. But alongside that, I was building my Skyline. So I learned on my electric Skyline, and that thing's been rebuilt 3 times now, and it's about to go through another rebuild now for the 4th time. So yeah, that's sort of a never-ending job, I suppose, on the side for me, is that car. But it started with a Bolt. Sorry.
And was it literally learning from, okay, what's on YouTube, what's on the forums, what can I, reverse engineer? It was all sort of learned practically, was it?
Everything's hands-on. I mean, I'm not many people. I'm severely dyslexic, so I just don't tell anyone normally. So for me, everything is got to be very hands-on, very visual, because I won't sit and read books. That's just not me. I just can't do it. So everything was very much hands-on. I mean, I've come from a hands-on background, so I'm always hands-on. But it was very much, car electronics and high voltage was completely new to me. I mean, when you look at the builds I did 4 years ago with the Skyline, and I look at them now, I'm amazed that it even works at the time. But I had some good people around me at the time to get it going and get it to that point, and obviously quickly from then it's progressed. But the Skyline's got a Chevy Volt. It used to have a Volt pack in. It's now got a Chevy Bolt pack in there. It's still got the same large drive unit it had 4 years ago. Still got the welded diff I put in it 4 years ago. So. Still got an open source control board in there. So there's still fundamental features that still maintain from original that I just haven't seen the point in upgrading because there was nothing wrong with it. So it sort of shows, that car's been used and abused a lot.
Well, I've seen it being abused. I mean, that car really caught people's attention of what's possible for a sort of a retrofit.
Yes. Yeah, I mean, that caught the attention for getting us our first job. So we did 3 stunt cars for a show in Macau in China, which was 2 350Zs and a Porsche 911, but they were space frame chassis. Tesla motor, Tesla battery pack, Tesla chargers, Tesla DC to DC. So everything in there was Tesla. Pretty much all of it was open source at the time as well.
Wow.
So yeah, we did that. That pushed the boundaries a little bit at the time because I don't think anyone else really wanted to take the job on, shall we say, apart from us. So we took that job on. Luckily, it was the cars was used for drifting, so they were on or off. It wasn't a road car, so it was quite nice in a way because we didn't have to. To be perfectly honest, it's very easy to get a car to do drifting, and which is on and off throttle. When it's hard is when you want to do feathering the throttle slowly for pull away and regen, and that's when it gets a lot more difficult from the setup side of things. But if you want something just to go fast, 0 to 60, that's the easy bit. It's the drivability daily that makes it a lot more difficult from what we found over the years.
Yeah, and then the more time you spend in it, especially not going around a drift track, the more things you notice, the more things you want to be just right, just perfect, just not smacking into the car in front of you. It's
Yes.
And that gets you into all sorts of interesting engineering questions as well, because one of the things with retrofit is things like weight distribution, is things like safety. There's making it work, and then there's making it work, and there's quite a big difference between the two. And I guess you're sort of both the iterations of your own car and the sort of iterations of the work that you now do for other people's cars must you really have to do an awful lot of thinking about all that stuff.
Yeah, it gets quite scary, I suppose, because you go from DIY is one thing, it's your car, it's you. So if you hurt yourself or something, it's sort of, it's on you. But as soon as you get to a point of view of a company and you're doing these systems to give to other people, suddenly the liabilities change quite quickly. And you'll get lots of angry people if you don't do it right. So, I mean, we've gone, definitely from one extreme to the other extreme over the years. We did start off in a fairly good place. I mean, we started off with battery management systems.
Right, okay.
We started off with 400 volt systems instead of like the lower voltage Hyper 9 stuff. So we started at a certain level from day one, I suppose, in a way. But from then it's progressed heavily down the routes. A lot of it's been learning. Obviously, the industry has changed massively in the last 4 years.
Sure.
Like, it's crazy. I probably don't understand because I've been so engrossed in it. I suppose I probably don't quite realize how much it has changed. But it's things from going from stuffing glands in the battery boxes to nice high voltage connectors with shielded cable. Like, that's quite a transition for a lot of people. And a lot of people won't do it because actually stuffing glands are cheap. High voltage connectors are a couple of £100 a pop. So
yeah,
that's a really quick one for people to save money on. But when it comes to our stuff of making stuff bolt in and sort of easily serviceable, you need to do that. So we've sort of got to the point where we went from DIY to sort of, I suppose, acceptable for people to use, drive daily, sort of from point of view to how do we get as close to OEM as possible. When we do work with some of the OEMs now, so there's stuff going on there in the background, which we do, which, we now have to meet these OEM standards, which is a whole world of pain. From DFMEAs to, all the flow diagrams, all the documentation that goes with it. There's a huge amount of sort of hoops to jump through, shall we say, which then suddenly takes you from you might have, I don't know, a set of parts at 16 grand for a Hyper 9 system, but then as soon as you spend all that additional development and time to actually get accepted by sort of OEM world, you end up spending double the amount of money on development to tick all the other boxes. So you've got this very much a very different approach, but the way we've gone now is if we do kits in volume, you bring the price back down again because you can just spread that development cost out over a load of kits. So that's where the kits sort of come from our point of view.
So let's take a step back then, because the company Zero EV, when did it go from we will take on commissions like those cars in Macau to we're going to supply parts, we're going to supply projects? Was that a sort of a planned evolution, or was that something that came about through demand?
I think it was demand. I mean, me and Alex, so my business partner Alex Dayward, he's been with me from the start. Actually, Kevin and Damien introduced me to Alex.
Okay.
So it's a very
small world, isn't it?
So Alex was actually supplying Damien Tesla motors. So Damien's first Tesla motor came from Alex. So Alex was supplying Damien Johannes, and then they got me in contact with Alex, and we're within 2 years of each other. So we sort of got on very well, and then we started Zero EV. I suppose me and Alex learned quite soon on that actually there was no one in the market doing kit, like parts that work together. Like from when I tried to do my, and it was like, well, what BMS do I use? What batteries do I use? What voltage? What ampage? What cable size? Like that data still isn't really readily available now. It's a lot more available now, but it's still not quite. There's not a one-stop guide, I suppose, that covers everything as of yet. But we are working on something with our training courses to cover a lot more of the conversion world. I've
Gotcha.
been doing quite a lot of work on recently. But yeah, that's sort of where we suddenly realised that there's nothing there. There's lots of gaps. There's nowhere you can go. I mean, you had EV West in the US, but even then there was gaps with that, and there still is. There's still not everything documented, everything covered, and sort of all that stuff there. So that was quite obvious. I mean, the thing was transitioning from doing conversions to doing parts and kits, because you end up booking in loads of conversions, and then you can't really stop and go the other direction until you've finished where you are. So we've still been doing odd bits and odd conversions as we've been going along. We do a lot for the film industry still, so a lot of stunt vehicles still. That's never gone away.
Okay.
That's sort of very well hidden in the background, the work we do for like Warner Brothers and Disney and all that stuff. But that's sort of hidden away of we'll do one-off low vol, a couple of film vehicles for a film out there sort of thing. Which some of them actually will finally come out soon because they've all been filmed over lockdown. So some of them might catch up and actually hit cinemas at some point. So we still do that stuff. We still support the film industry heavily because they're all starting to transition that way. So we've still got a bit of do a little bit of one-off custom world, but it's more that we supply them, we support them, they build it. But that's still the hands-on side. And then apart from that, a lot of it is B2B supply of components and kits.
So for other, basically, sort of, what we would have been a sort of hot rod shop almost in the past, or a garage, they basically take your kit and do conversions for other people.
Yeah, I mean, we supply a lot of EV conversion shops in UK, Europe, US. So we are in the background, I suppose, for a lot of the EV shops because we buy such volume and stuff. There's just a lot of them can't buy in the volumes required to get some of these parts. Because a lot of the manufacturers won't even talk to you if you want ones and twos. You need to be buying 100 of something to make it worth their while. So we're sort of in that point where actually we can buy volume to supply out to the EV shops, which is why we run the web store alongside, because actually we can get all these parts and make them available to the DIYers, which they wouldn't be able to source themselves. So sort of a byproduct of the B2B is the web store to an extent.
And that's really cool because like things like the connectors you talked about, sure, they're more expensive than just sticking some glands on the end of the cable and crimping it, which is fine for your sort of first one, but those parts wouldn't be accessible at all to people unless you were buying in volume. So if you do want to take that step up in terms of the quality of your conversion, you're either sort of hunting around a scrapyard for an OEM part that you can actually reuse, which you quite often can't. They're very hard to reuse. Or you don't really have many options in terms of, parts, but it's only there because you are buying in volume. And I think anybody who's tried to buy sort of unobtainium connectors for OEM bits knows that it's great if you can buy 10,000, but not very useful if you want to buy one.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, like we've got to a point now where we have direct contacts with TE and all these companies because we've got to sort of level where now they'll actually look at us and go, right, they are a proper business. They are at a set scale where it's actually worth us talking to them. But you have to get to that point because a lot of them just brush you off and go, oh, you're a little conversion shop. I don't want to talk to you. We've finally made enough impact that they actually take us seriously, which is quite good and quite surprising at times. But I've gone completely off topic. I can't remember what the question was.
Well, you're talking about the supplying EV conversion shops, and I sort of realised how big you got when your name started popping up in the other YouTube channels I watch. So I've been sort of following your YouTube series, and I think any car nut, I watch a lot of sort of car YouTube, and suddenly the Zero EV name keeps popping up all over the place. I'm like, okay.
Yeah, we are hidden in the background.
Yeah,
hidden out in the background, which it works quite well. We just try and play nice with everyone at the end of the day, because we're not doing the conversions anymore. It's sort of we can just support from that point of view. And then we've been working on the kits now, which is mainly to enable, as you said, like the hot rod shops or the restoration shops. They don't want to upskill. They don't want to train loads of staff. They don't want to become an EV conversion shop, which is doing loads of one-offs. They want to just do their Porsche. And all they've ever done is Porsche. All they want to do is Porsche. Or they've done their Land Rover or multiple different vehicles. That's all they want to do. So we're trying to focus on that side actually, where we can talk to Porsche specialists or Land Rover specialists or other vehicles we're working on and just supply them a bolt-in kit mean, there's gaps. There's a lot of vehicles we don't do, but we're preferring to do a selection of vehicles very well to OEM level, which no one can get really close to from a quality point of view.
And I
And
think
then we'll
that's
slowly expand that.
how you select those vehicles is interesting, because the ones you talked about, Land Rover, really interesting combination of, there are lots of them around, but they've got a massive enthusiast base, a lot of parts supply, but they've also got a certain cachet, and like Porsche's the same. There are lots of 911s out there, but they've got a value that means people are willing to spend an amount converting them. I don't know if you've actually got a formula, but it feels like there's a sort of sweet spot there in terms of volume, prestige, and sort of quality that you're working to.
Yeah, I mean, I suppose some of it's guessing in a way, because some of the vehicles people are never going to want to convert. There's certain niches which people just don't want to go down that route. It's trying to weigh up between, is the vehicle valuable enough that someone will spend the money on it? I think that's one of the key things is, yes, you could do mass production of MGB kits or sort of other small classic ranges, but the problem is they've not quite got to a value yet where people will go and spend 30,000, 40,000, 50,000 pounds on them. It's just not there. But you take Land Rovers, which actually there's £100,000 plus Land Rovers these days, and Porsches are high value and stuff like that. We've sort of, I suppose, we've done the Tesla route in a way. We've focused on high value, low production to start with, and then I think as we get the production lines running properly in scale, our buying power increases, so we're buying lots more batteries, lots more motors and stuff like that. Then we can start looking at the smaller, cheaper vehicles and bring the price down. So that's, I think, where it's going to be, is the high-end vehicles, the Land Rovers, the Porsches, stuff like that. They're going to pay for a lot of the base development for the production lines, the systems, and we produce them in lower numbers, and then we can scale up to sort of larger volume, more budget vehicles, longer term.
Something like the MX-5 that you were playing with.
Yeah, like the MX-5 was probably too early. But it got a lot of attention. It was the perfect car to get people sort of thinking about it. In a couple of years' time, maybe, once the prices come down and stuff like that. But right now, it's not the ideal vehicle. The MX-5 is currently in lots of bits again, and I don't know if I'll put it back together, to be honest. It might. One thing we've been doing is the MX-5 it's the perfect kit of parts for training.
Yeah.
So currently, it's been stripped, and we're building a training bench from the MX-5.
Gotcha.
So our new training courses, which is about EV conversions, which cover all the different topics, it's the MX-5 on a table, basically, so we can do interrogation and go through how the systems work in depth. But the MX-5 was perfect for that, to strip apart and use for those bits. So the MX-5 is no more at the moment.
Have you got your eye on it? What might be next? Have you got some ideas about what things that really appeal?
There's a couple. I mean, there's, I suppose, a handful of different cars, but there's a lot of people now getting into the market. So we have done design work for Mercedes Pagodas, for instance. We did a lot of design work around it, and then we stopped because actually the tech was moving ahead and we needed the right motor and gearbox solution. So we weren't quite happy with what was there, so we put things on hold. Same with like E-types and stuff like that. We've done some base work, and then we sort of stopped and went, until the tech is there or the batteries have got to a certain point where they're sensible design-wise, structure size-wise, or we've got the right motor with production gearbox, which obviously was what we were testing in the MX-5. It wasn't worth pushing them forward. So we're getting to the point now where actually we have got prototype gearboxes fully operational. We have got there's the new Sonic motor range that we're actually bringing out. It's being released at fully charged. I don't know if you're going to fully charged, but yeah, we've got.
Sadly, it's a long trek for me down south.
For you, yes.
Yeah, I do want to get there. At some point, I will, cross the north-south divide and get down there. But
yeah, so we've got a new motor range coming out. Well, it's Sonic Motors, basically, is what the range is. And we've got a 70 kilowatt motor, 120 kilowatt motor, and 180 kilowatt motors. We've got 3 different sizes. We've teamed up with AEM for the VCU. So we've now got an in-house VCU that we've been into co-developing with them. So that gives us loads of usability, loads of extra add-ons like displays and PDUs and all the other stuff. But the main thing is the whole systems are 350 volt nominal. So the new Sonic 70 is smaller than a Hyper 9. But it's high voltage. So if someone now wants to do CCS fast charging or CHAdeMO, they've got the option that they can actually get a motor that will allow them to do it.
Gotcha.
But I think a lot of people have been held back and they haven't been able to do fast charging because the only option out there was the Hyper 9, or you could sort of go Tesla or Nissan Leaf route. But there was no off-the-shelf, brand new in volume solution. So we've sort of got those now coming out. I mean, pricing-wise, they're not quite as cheap as the Hyper 9s yet, but as our volumes go up, we're hoping the prices will keep coming down. I mean, the big problem at the moment is with all the shutdowns in China and COVID, the prices have actually gone up by, I think battery prices are set to go up by 20% in the next couple of months. So prices are actually going to be going up on EV conversion stuff before they come back down again, unfortunately.
Yeah, I'm glad I've bought most of the parts for my next project already.
Yeah, we've just pre-ordered an awful lot of stuff so that we could maintain a lower price for sales for the web store and stuff, and hoping we've ordered enough that we can not have to bring prices up to counteract
So ride it
and
out.
then hopefully by the time we do a next order, it's come back down again. That's what we're really hoping for. So we're hoping no one actually has to see these 20% rises in parts. We're hoping we've just about bought enough to cover sort of the next 6 months to a year. But with the way things keep growing and stuff, it's very difficult to predict.
But even basic consumables have rocketed. I went to pick up some steel today, and the stockholder was telling me that he put an order in on Friday and he put another order in on Monday, and in between the two, the price of steel plate had gone up 30%. Just absolutely incredible rises at the moment.
It's quite scary, really.
Yeah. And that's before you get into sort of complex components and the very, very high demand, like lithium-ion batteries.
Well, we found with chargers, for instance, we may have been buying, I don't know, 50 chargers at a time. And we're like, oh, brilliant. Now we're over the 100, we get a better pricing point. Well, actually, the better price point is the same as the pricing point was at 50 because the prices have gone up. So we're sort of going, oh, we're getting bigger, we're buying more stuff. But as we're scaling, we're just staying at the same pricing point because everything else is increasing, which in one way is good because it means from our customers' point of view, it's not actually affecting them.
Yeah.
Luckily, because we're buying higher volumes, so it's actually counteracting it. But from our point of view, it's really frustrating that we're not able to bring prices down at all because we're chasing our tail with it, unfortunately. I think we did an order this week for something like 4,000 355 battery modules for the next year, just to try and cover demand and stuff, and we'll bring them in sort of tiered times. But it means we've locked the prices in, so we don't have to increase. It's just it's scary amounts now, but it shows the industry's going that way. It's growing, the demand is there, which is great, and we'll actually have enough stuff in stock that we can continually supply the industry for the next year without the conversion industry suffering. Because obviously the conversion industry would be the first industry to suffer, because straight away anyone supplying stuff to OEMs and stuff will just not supply to the little people.
Yeah, they're going to prioritize the big contracts.
Yeah, exactly. So I think we're quite lucky we sit in that space where we're able to continue supplying the industry, which is good. I mean, obviously there's more EVs on the road now as well, so there's more salvage parts coming available, which is good. The big problem is that it's now Model 3 and the batteries are useless. Yeah. So it's sort of, if they've been Model S's and more of them, then brilliant. But suddenly, actually, we're now in a position where the Model S batteries are very hard to come by.
But there's a lot more diversity as well. I mean, you've got... Yes. I mean, there's loads of stuff out there that I haven't even seen people experimenting with yet. Like, I haven't seen people reverse engineering the Hyundai batteries yet, necessarily, or the some reverse engineering of the MG batteries. I mean, there's so many different options out there now.
The MG batteries are actually fairly good.
Okay.
You can remove the BMS board off of them. So we've removed the BMS board. We've designed a new BMS board. So it's with the MG module, you'll, like our Tesla replacement boards, the MG modules, you'll be able to open the lid up, pull the old board off, put a new board on.
Brilliant.
So that's all we've gone with that. And luckily MGB didn't solder. There was no solder joints. It was actually just pressure point. So nothing was. Yeah, it's a very clever design the way they did it.
Cool.
But it means that you can actually replace the BMS boards, which is quite a good thing. So there's options there with those. So there's a lot of options coming out. And I think the MG is it's a cattle module or cattle cells, which we tried to buy, but we can't buy them. There's just too much. They just want to supply the OEMs only.
Wow.
In volume. So there's there's supply issues there, I think, with them. But yeah, the MGB packs are quite good, and potentially you can replace the board, or there's a couple of aftermarket BMS systems come out now which are starting to look at in the open source world actually work with the onboard battery modules.
Which is
about
what I'm
heat.
doing with the
So,
BMW modules with Simp,
yes.
which is fantastic for that. What's your take on? I mean, so you said earlier, the industry's obviously changed a lot in the last 4 years, and that's true of the sort of the broader, OEM, EV sales have outpaced everybody's expectations year on year, or most people's expectations year on year, and I suspect will continue to do so because actually it turns out they're really good cars and people want them. Range anxiety and charging infrastructure be damned. But then obviously the conversion industry's changed radically. I mean, even since I only got involved 12, 13 months ago, probably started my first project. Was it more than that, or was it? No, probably took me a bit more than that actually. But anyway, I'm losing track of time now. Maybe it was 2 years ago, but it's changed a hell of a lot since then. I mean, there's been so many advances in terms of accessibility of conversions, in terms of the amount of public profile they get and news media and things. Where do you see the conversion industry and the DIY side going? Do you see it going from strength to strength, price rises notwithstanding?
I don't know. I do have some concerns about the DIY industry. I
Mm,
think with conversations we've been having with DVLA, DSA, there is going to be stricter rules coming into the UK soon.
mm,
We've seen it happening. Like it used to be, you can update the logbook, send in an invoice, and they change it to electric. Now they send out someone to assess the vehicle and physically check that no modifications have been made to chassis and everything's bolted in and that sort of stuff. So we've been quite lucky. Obviously, we've developed everything to be fully reversible and bolt in,
yeah.
which is good. But from a DIY point of view, it's a lot easier to not design it that way and just drill some extra holes and weld a couple of brackets on, which is understandable. And that's the way we wish we could do it because it makes life a lot easier.
Mm.
So yeah, we're starting to find that the DVLA and stuff are cracking down slowly. But we are in talks with them with a couple of other EV conversion shops to sort of have a group of us that will all help deal with the DVLA. But I do see some sort of stricter standards coming in around sort of the R100.2 sort of specification, just for base safety. I
Yeah.
don't know how far they're going to take it, but we'll see how that progresses.
I think most people in the sort of the DIY field would be very comfortable with some sort of enhanced MOT or some sort of inspection that says, yeah, you've not created a death trap that's going to wipe out you and everyone around you. But for personal reassurance, apart from anything else, it's like the classic car industry. General advice is even if your car doesn't need an MOT, get an MOT for your sake and everybody else's. I think that the DIY industry probably needs something similar, as long as those sort of rules are reasonable and there's good communication around it, which I think has been, certainly from the DIY community's perspective, has been a bit lacking.
Yeah, I mean, also the emergency services have got big concerns because they
Yeah.
don't know how to approach these vehicles, how to deal with. We do a lot of training with fire brigade and stuff, and it's a real worry for them is how do they approach these vehicles? How do they know they're converted? Well, DVLA needs to make sure they update the logbooks and not refuse
Mm.
to, because there's issues after 2001 where the DVLA don't want to change the fuel type.
Absolutely. It's one of the things
Um,
that baffled me was what happens when it's in a crash.
like we had it with the Porsche Boxster, it got updated. It's 2004. They changed it, and then a couple of months ago they sent the logbook back saying it's petrol again. So we've now gone back to them and said, well, that's fine, but when this fire person turns up to the car, they think it's petrol. So they approach that car in a different manner than they would if it was electric. So you're putting these people at risk. So we've approached it from that point of view, which we're hoping will actually sort of ride home. We're not asking them to remove the tax, we're asking them just to change
Yeah.
it to electric. So there's certain things there that we'll go through. I think there needs to be some sort of test, which isn't an MOT, it's not an IVA, but it's something in between where if someone
Yeah.
that actually knows what they're looking at looks at it. The big thing I see is it's easy to make, or from my point of view, it's easy for someone to make a black battery box that looks good. It's how is it wired inside is the problem. The fire
Mm.
risk is within the buzz bars, within the internal wiring. So I would say if they're gonna do something, it needs to be something that's a little bit more sort of intrusive to a level where they just check that the inside of the battery box looks as tidy as the outside does.
Yeah.
Because I have seen some quite scary things over the years, which I'm amazed are on the road and haven't caught fire at times. So there's some there's some risk there. I think we've been quite lucky so far,
Mm.
but the concern is that the concern I found is we did the YouTube stuff and in some way made it look easy to some extent, which is actually really dangerous because
Mm.
then you get a different type of DIYer getting involved. You don't have the sort of the electrical engineers and the very knowledgeable people doing it that have a background in it. You suddenly have people that have no background in EVs which is a bit like I did when I started. I can't knock it because, I had no idea when I got involved, but there is that risk is you're not having ones and twos, you're suddenly getting hundreds of people that want to do their own EV. So there's some high risk there longer term.
Yeah.
But the more kits we can produce, the more we can document things, the better that will become long term, and the more safety features we put in.
And you want those people going down the kit route, really. You don't want them going down the salvage route, and hacking things together.
Yeah. But there's a lot of stuff on YouTube now, I think, which wasn't there before. So there is an awful lot of stuff that people can follow and look through and see the do's and the don'ts and sort of all those sort of things. But what we've also found is that we've been adding in safety systems without asking, shall we say. It's more of, if you're going to buy these parts first, you're buying this part as well. Like you're buying a contactor controller, you're going to have to run the right BMS. Like we're not giving people the option. Normally we're saying you need to run these set things to run our system. And not because we want to sell more stuff. Obviously that comes into it, but part of it's actually, at least if we know you run those bits, it's safe. We know you're running automotive grade stuff, and it's a little bit more expensive, but that battery pack costs you thousands of pounds. You may as well spend a little bit more and make sure that battery pack stays safe for longer and lasts longer. Because one of the things we've been doing now with all our new stuff is it's tied into the discharge and charge limits that the battery management system says it can do. So therefore, it doesn't damage the battery, and if there's any issues, it shuts down properly. There's all these little bits that we're trying to deal with, so you don't have to. And then suddenly your system's safe without you even having known it's become safe, if that makes to some extent.
Yeah.
From that point of view, but it's how far do you go is definitely thing. But then the other thing we've seen in the market is it's a new demographic getting involved with the EV converted side of things, in that you've now got the people that love the look of the Classic but would never own one. Okay. Suddenly they can have a Classic that's reliable and drive it daily. So you suddenly got these people that actually they bought a Tesla, but if they could have bought a Porsche instead for a similar price that was fully electric, they probably would have done. So we're starting to get that sort of side.
And that kind of defines your pricing, doesn't it? It's like if people are benchmarking this against the alternative is a Model S, then
exactly. So if you can build a kit to that standard, that level, that's a bolt-in reversible into a classic Porsche, suddenly that becomes a lot more appealing to an awful lot of people. Like we've got a couple of customers in London that've got bolt-in Porsche kits, and they drive them daily in London as their daily driver. They didn't want a Model S, or a Model X. They wanted their classic Porsche, so that suits them perfectly, and it keeps the classics on the road. So in one way, that's also going to keep the classic restoration industry running, because I think there's a lot of those industries are a bit worried. Where is it going to go with classics long term? Are they gonna die out, and actually it looks like the classics are having a new lease of life, and I think they'll be on the road a lot longer, and you'll see a lot more of them on the road being driven daily or more regularly, because they'll be reliable vehicles that can be driven all the time.
Certainly makes the road more exciting. So listen, we're running out of time. 2 last questions. First one, silly one, which I'll give you a minute to think about, is what's your favourite tool? And while you think about that, any sort of projects you're working on at the moment that are really exciting you, whether it's new parts or new cars or stuff that's coming down the line?
So the Zonic stuff obviously was quite exciting. In fact, we can actually bring out some motors with the Zonic brand, which
are they going to be for any sort of, what sort of orientation are they designed to be used in? Are they in for sort of front engine rear wheel drive, or are they bolt up to a gearbox?
Big mixture. So currently it's motors with inverters, but we do have transaxle and prop drive gearboxes to go on them.
Wow, okay.
The big benefit is all the Zonic stuff's been designed to have the Hyper 9 faceplate. So it's a B face, just an 8-bolt B face. So as much as it's got a spline output, if you have a Hyper 9 fitted to your car and you want to update it to a 400-volt system, you don't have to have a new adapter plate made. It bolts to the original Hyper 9 adapter plate. So that made life, it's a stepping stone, I suppose. Suddenly you have to get 400 volt and you have to do spline output, but your original Hyper 9 adapter plate do fit from that point of view. So yeah, the Zonic stuff's quite good. There is some other projects we're working on that I will come out probably later next month.
Okay.
With some other,
watch this space.
Yeah, there's some exciting project there that will come to light, and everyone will be, it's Zero V are doing that project. But yeah, that will come out later next month. Hopefully, there'll be a press release on that, and that'll be really good.
Very cool.
My favourite tool at the moment, probably 2, maybe 3 tools. One of my favourite tools is our air automatic crimping machine. That's quite cool.
Okay,
just because it makes cool noise. It's got massive teeth, so you could lose a finger if you get it wrong. But it makes a really cool noise, and it's so satisfying doing high voltage cables and just pressing the foot pedal and it just crimping it and being done.
Yes.
No hand like crimping or anything. It's just you put it in, you press the foot pedal, and it just does it.
Nice.
So that's quite nice. And we've also got the stripper and crimping machine for the small like battery management cables and stuff. And that's really nice because you just
that must save a lot of time.
And it strips it, crimps it, and does it just in one hit. And that's so nice. And the last thing you want is a Bluetooth crimp when you build a car, and you suddenly like, where is this wiring for? Like the amount of time you lose trying to find a wiring problem is just ridiculous.
Don't I was driving my conversion back the other day, and my DC to DC converter shut down because of a Bluetooth wiring connection.
Yep.
That was good fun. Right, listen, Chris, thank you so much for doing it. Thanks so much for going on. There's lots of exciting stuff in the pipeline for Zero EV, it sounds like, which is very cool. Thanks for sharing as much as you have on the YouTube channels, because that's been really useful. And I'm sure a lot of people have watched those, even if it has encouraged some people. Some might argue, like me, who maybe haven't got the talent to do this well, but I keep trying.
Well, you fake it till you make it, don't you, I suppose?
As long as you survive till you make it, that's fine.
Exactly. That's fine. End of the day, Zero EV's done pretty well, and we had to learn at some point. And this industry currently, no one knows exactly what they're doing, as I found. It's a new industry for everyone. It's not just an industry that's everyone's already trained for. No one quite knows everything yet, which is quite exciting for the younger generations.
So come in,
to get involved in.
Try it, learn, and if you can't do it safely, buy a kit. That's the
or buy a Tesla. You got a couple
or a
options
Tesla.
Just go buy, or a Nissan Leaf. Yeah, there's quite a few good ones now, which have come out.
Brilliant. Thanks for coming on. Thank you for watching and listening. If you do like this stuff, please do like and subscribe. If you just want the audio version, and if you're watching this on YouTube, you can go and find it on Spotify, on Stitcher, on Apple Podcasts. It's on all of the audio networks as well. And that's it. Thanks very much. Bye bye.